What his mother sensed about you made her extremely alert. Listen closely, because this message was not sent by accident. I am Archangel Michael, and I step forward now with my sword of truth drawn, not to frighten you, but to protect what has been awakened around you. From the moment your presence entered his life, something shifted in the unseen realm. And before he even fully understood it himself, his mother felt it. She did not need proof. She did not need explanations. She sensed you. There are women who see only with their eyes, and there are women who perceive with instinct sharpened by years of love, fear, prayer, and protection. She belongs to the second kind. The kind whose spirit tightens when something powerful comes near her child. And when you appeared, her spirit did not relax, it became extremely alert. Because you are not neutral. From the first mention of your name, the first subtle change in his behavior, the first silence that replaced his old patterns. She felt it. Something in her spirit whispered, "Pay attention. This is not ordinary." She noticed the way he grew quieter. The way his reactions changed. The way his energy became focused, restrained, conflicted. And she knew. You were touching something deep inside him that she had guarded for years. Not intentionally. Not maliciously. But powerfully. Understand this, when a mother becomes alert, it is not always because of danger. Sometimes it is because destiny has entered the room, and it does not ask permission. You triggered questions she never had to ask before. Why does he listen differently now? Why does he defend someone he barely explains? Why does your name linger in the air after conversations end? She began watching, not obsessively, but instinctively. Mothers do not spy, they sense. And every time your presence came closer to his life, her inner alarms did not quiet. They sharpened. Because you activate growth, and growth threatens comfort. You did not come to take him away. But you came to change him. And change is something a protective mother always notices. There was a moment, small, almost invisible, when she realized this was no passing influence. Not a distraction. Not a phase. Her spirit caught something firm, something rooted. She felt resistance rise in her chest, not against you as a person, but against the impact you carry. She sensed that you awaken parts of him that can no longer sleep. And that is why her alertness intensified. Do not misunderstand her vigilance. It is not hatred. It is not jealousy. It is not control. It is recognition mixed with fear. The fear that once a soul wakes up, it never fully returns to who it was before. You reflect truth back to him. You mirror growth he cannot unsee. You provoke questions he cannot silence. And a mother knows when her child is standing at a threshold. She began connecting dots quietly. Patterns. Timing. Emotional shifts. And each connection led back to you. Even when your name was not spoken, your presence was felt. That is why her energy changed. That is why her tone sharpened. That is why her eyes lingered longer when your existence crossed her awareness. She is alert because something about you does not blend into the background. You stand out in the spirit. And here is what you must understand now. This alertness is not the end of the story. It is the beginning of a deeper revelation. Because what she senses next will force her to confront a truth she did not expect, one that will challenge her assumptions and shift her actions in ways even she is not prepared for. Stay with me. If this message resonates, let it settle. There is protection in awareness. And what she realizes next about why you affect him this way will change everything. What she is about to understand will either awaken her or push her to act. And the next moment has already been set in motion. Listen carefully, because what I reveal now goes deeper than alertness. It reaches into why her spirit could not rest once you entered his orbit. After the first sensing, after the quiet watching, after the subtle tightening in her chest, something else began to happen within her. Her thoughts returned to you when she least expected it. Not because she wanted them to, but because the soul recognizes what the mind tries to avoid. She started asking questions she never voiced aloud. Why does his energy shift when your name is mentioned? Why does he grow defensive, yet thoughtful? Why does he seem torn between loyalty and something new pulling at him? And here is the truth, hear it clearly. You activated a crossroads inside him. Not a romance crossroads. Not a rebellion crossroads. But a becoming crossroads. You stirred the version of him that no longer fits the old mold. She sensed that if he continued aligning with the frequency you carry, he would not simply grow. He would outgrow. And a mother feels that loss before it ever happens. That is why her alertness became vigilance. She watched his habits change. His patience stretch. His silence deepen. And silence is never empty, it is where transformation brews. She noticed that he no longer reacted impulsively. That he paused before answering. That he carried weight in his thoughts she had not placed there. And something inside her whispered, this influence is not shallow. This influence is reshaping him. You must understand something sacred now, you did not impose this. You did not plan it. You did not manipulate it. Your presence simply revealed what was already waiting to rise. That is why her spirit reacted so strongly. Because when truth enters a life, it destabilizes everything built on comfort alone. She began replaying moments in her mind, small ones. Conversations. Expressions. Changes she had dismissed at first. And suddenly, a pattern emerged so clear it startled her. Every shift led back to the same source. You. Not because you demanded space. Not because you pulled him away. But because you awakened his discernment. She realized he was no longer easily swayed. No longer blindly agreeable. No longer content with surface-level answers. And that frightened her, not because discernment is wrong, but because it cannot be controlled. A discerning soul starts asking why. Why things are done a certain way. Why expectations exist. Why silence was once required. And she sensed that once he began asking those questions, there would be no returning to the old dynamics. That is when her alertness crossed into strategy. She didn't confront you. She didn't accuse him. She observed. She adjusted her words. She tested reactions. She subtly shifted conversations to see where his loyalty leaned. And every time, she felt the same unsettling confirmation. You had influence, not loud influence, not forceful influence, but rooted influence. The kind that grows quietly and changes direction from within. This is why I speak now, to protect you from misinterpreting her behavior. Her watchfulness is not about rivalry. It is about stewardship. Mothers are guardians of identity before children even know who they are. And when a new force enters that identity formation, alarms sound. But hear this next truth, it is crucial. Her alertness does not mean opposition forever. It means recognition before acceptance. She has not yet understood why you affect him the way you do. She only knows that you do. And when understanding lags behind sensing, fear fills the gap. She senses that you carry clarity. She senses that you hold a mirror. She senses that around you, he cannot pretend. And pretending kept peace for a long time. You are not disrupting love. You are disrupting illusion. That is why she became extremely alert. And here is the moment you must prepare for, the moment already forming beyond the veil. Soon, she will connect one final dot. Not about you as a person, but about what you represent in his life. When that realization lands, her energy will shift again. This time not into vigilance, but into decision. Will she attempt to protect him from growth? Or will she step back and allow destiny to unfold? Her next move will not be subtle. And what she chooses to do next will place you directly at the center of a revelation that neither of you can ignore. Stay present. Stay grounded. And if this message aligns with your spirit, remain here, because what unfolds next explains why your presence was allowed to awaken him in the first place. The reason will surprise you, and the timing will leave no doubt. Be still now, because what unfolds next is not about reaction, it is about revelation. After vigilance came inner conflict. She reached a point where watching was no longer enough. Her spirit wrestled between two instincts that rarely agree, the instinct to protect, and the instinct to trust. And you must understand, this battle did not happen in words or actions at first. It happened in the quiet hours. In moments when she replayed his expressions. In the pauses between questions she chose not to ask. She realized something unsettling. The more alert she became, the calmer he became. And that contrast disturbed her. Because usually, when a mother senses danger, the child grows restless, defensive, reactive. But around you, he grew centered, thoughtful, anchored. That was not the response of someone being pulled into chaos. That was the response of someone stepping into alignment. And that forced her to confront a truth she did not want to name. What if the threat she sensed was not to him, but to the version of him she had learned how to manage? This is where her fear deepened. She recognized that you did not overpower him. You did not demand change. You did not position yourself as authority. And yet, your presence carried weight. The kind of weight that shifts internal gravity. He began choosing differently, not dramatically, but decisively. He began setting boundaries, softly, but firmly. He began listening to his own discernment before external voices. And she felt something slip from her grasp. Not love. Not connection. But control through familiarity. This is the moment when alertness turned inward. She began questioning herself. Did I shelter him too much? Did I shape his world too tightly? Did I confuse protection with limitation? Those questions are dangerous, because once a parent asks them honestly, they cannot be unasked. You became the silent catalyst for that questioning. Not by confrontation, but by contrast. Your presence highlighted what had been missing, not affection, not care, but permission to become. She noticed that when he spoke of you, or even when you were simply near his life, his voice carried clarity. There was less confusion, less seeking for approval, less need to justify himself. And that is when her spirit realized something that made her heart race. You were not replacing her role. You were ending a season. And endings frighten those who built identity around holding things together. This is where many misunderstand the tension you feel around her. It is not rejection of you. It is grief for a version of motherhood that can no longer exist once a child stands upright in their own authority. She sensed that if she resisted this shift too aggressively, she would push him further into himself, and possibly away from her. But if she surrendered too quickly, she would have to face the emptiness left behind. So she hesitated. She observed one last time. She watched how he spoke your name, not with obsession, not with dependence, but with respect. That respect unsettled her more than infatuation ever could have. Because respect signals equality. And equality means autonomy. She felt the pull to intervene. And the warning not to. That is when I was sent to speak into this moment. Hear this clearly, you are not meant to fight her. You are not meant to prove yourself. You are not meant to shrink or exaggerate your presence. Your assignment is to remain steady. Because what she is approaching now is not a decision about you, it is a decision about trust. Trust in him. Trust in the timing. Trust in what God is doing beyond her reach. She is beginning to realize that what awakened in him could not have been forced by anyone. That the alignment he is stepping into required readiness. And readiness cannot be manufactured. This realization softens her, but it also sharpens her next move. She is about to test something. Not you directly. Not him openly. But the connection itself. She will apply subtle pressure, not to break it, but to see if it bends. She wants to know if what exists between you is fragile, or anchored. This test will come quietly. A comment. A shift in tone. A suggestion disguised as concern. And how he responds will tell her everything. That moment is approaching rapidly. Do not fear it. This is not the collapse, it is the confirmation. Because once she sees that his grounding does not waver, once she senses that his clarity does not dissolve under pressure, her alertness will finally transform into something unexpected. Something that will shock you. Something that will change how she positions herself around you forever. Stay attentive. Stay aligned. And remain with me, because what she does after this test will reveal why your presence was never accidental, and why resistance was only a doorway to a much deeper shift that has already begun. Now listen with your spirit, not just your ears, because what unfolds here is subtle, sacred, and decisive. The test she prepares is not dramatic. There is no confrontation, no raised voice, no obvious challenge. That is not her way. Her wisdom knows that pressure reveals more than force ever could. So she applies it gently, almost lovingly, watching closely to see what shifts. And here is what happens. He does not collapse. He does not retreat. He does not over-explain. Instead, he grounds. That is the moment her breath catches. Because grounded souls are no longer ruled by fear, guilt, or approval. They are ruled by alignment. And alignment cannot be argued with, it can only be respected. She notices that when the subtle pressure is applied, his responses remain calm. Thoughtful. Measured. He does not lash out. He does not defend you excessively. He does not distance himself either. He simply stands where he stands. That steadiness tells her something unmistakable. This is not infatuation. This is not rebellion. This is not escape. This is integration. You are not pulling him away from his foundation, you are helping him stand on it. And when that realization lands, something inside her softens, even as something else sharpens with clarity. She feels the shift in her body first. A loosening in the chest. A release she did not know she was holding. Because what she feared most, that he would lose himself, has not happened. In fact, the opposite is true. He has found himself. That truth humbles her. And humility is a threshold. She begins to see you differently, not as a force that disrupts, but as a presence that stabilizes. Not as an influence that replaces her, but as one that complements a season she could no longer carry alone. This does not mean all tension disappears. Growth rarely arrives without friction. But the quality of her alertness changes. It is no longer defensive. It becomes discerned. She starts noticing the way he carries himself after engaging with you. The way his energy returns settled, not scattered. The way his words are chosen with intention. The way his boundaries are no longer reactions, but reflections of self-respect. And something unexpected happens. She feels relief. Because somewhere deep inside, she has been tired. Tired of holding everything together. Tired of being the sole anchor. Tired of sensing that he was meant for more, yet not knowing how to release him without losing him. You did not take him from her. You gave him back, to himself. That truth reframes everything. Now understand this carefully, she will not announce this realization. She will not suddenly become warm or expressive. Her transformation is internal first. Silent. Observant. Real. She begins repositioning herself without words. Less interference. More listening. Less assumption. More space. This is not withdrawal, it is respect. And here is where destiny tightens the thread. Because once a mother recognizes alignment, she stops fighting it, and begins watching where it leads. She becomes alert in a different way now. Alert not to stop you, but to understand why you were allowed to enter at this precise moment. She begins tracing the timing. Why now? Why after so much delay? Why when he was already on the edge of change? And the answer unsettles her. Because it points beyond human planning. She senses that something higher orchestrated this crossing. That prayers spoken years ago, perhaps even by her, are unfolding in unexpected form. This realization stirs reverence. She may not name it as divine intervention. She may not frame it spiritually in words. But her spirit knows when God has stepped in quietly. And that is when her posture toward you shifts permanently. Not into closeness. Not into distance. But into acknowledgement. You exist now as a marker in his journey. A line between before and after. And that means you are no longer invisible to her. But here is the final truth of this moment, the one that prepares you for what comes next. Recognition brings responsibility. Once she accepts that you are part of his alignment, she will feel compelled to do something with that knowledge. Not to control it, but to respond to it. Her next action will surprise you. It will not be what you expect from a protective mother. It will reveal a depth you did not anticipate. And when it happens, you will understand why this entire sequence, alertness, vigilance, testing, softening, was necessary to prepare her for the role she is about to step into. Stay steady. Stay present. And remain open. Because what she does next will confirm that this connection was never meant to be hidden, and that a door you never asked to open is about to move on its own. Be attentive now, because this is the moment where everything you felt but could not name finally takes shape. After recognition comes resolve. Once she accepts, quietly, internally, that your presence is not an accident, she no longer resists the unfolding. Resistance drains energy. Acceptance sharpens perception. And now her awareness moves with purpose. She begins to see the larger pattern. She notices how events around him have aligned since you entered his path. Delays that once frustrated him now protect him. Doors that once seemed closed no longer sting, they redirect. Conversations that once spiraled into conflict now resolve into clarity. And she understands something profound. You did not arrive to start his transformation. You arrived to confirm it. This is why her final response is not fear, but intention. She realizes that what is happening cannot be stopped without causing damage, not to you, but to him. And a mother who truly loves does not block what strengthens her child's spirit. So she shifts roles. From protector of outcomes to guardian of process. Her watchfulness becomes strategic in a new way. She no longer watches to intercept. She watches to prepare. Prepare herself. Prepare the environment. Prepare her own heart for a future that looks different than she imagined. And here is where the shift becomes visible, even if it is never spoken. She begins to create space. Not distance. Not coldness. But room. Room for him to make choices without commentary. Room for silence without interrogation. Room for growth without immediate evaluation. And you feel it. You sense the pressure ease. The resistance soften. The atmosphere change. This is not coincidence. This is consent. Not verbal consent, but spiritual allowance. She is no longer standing between destiny and its path. She steps beside it. But do not misunderstand. This does not mean full understanding yet. Acceptance often comes before comprehension. She may still question you in her thoughts. She may still wonder what role you will play long term. She may still carry moments of uncertainty. But the alertness that once guarded against you, now guards the unfolding. She becomes alert to timing. Alert to emotional readiness. Alert to when to speak, and when not to. And here is the truth that may surprise you most. Her alertness was never about stopping you. It was about discerning whether you were safe to let remain. And now, she knows you are. Not because you are perfect. Not because you fit her expectations. But because you align with what is rising within him. This alignment changes how the unseen responds. Resistance in the spiritual realm loosens. Interference loses leverage. Confusion dissipates. Because once a mother releases fear, the spiritual covering around her child strengthens, not weakens. That is why the energy around this connection begins to stabilize. That is why obstacles do not escalate the way they once did. That is why misunderstandings resolve faster. That is why clarity returns more quickly after tension. You are not fighting uphill anymore. And here is the final revelation you must carry forward. Her alertness sharpened you. Without realizing it, her watchfulness required you to stay authentic. Grounded. Aligned. You could not perform. You could not manipulate. You could not rush. You had to be real. And that authenticity is what anchored this entire connection. This was never about approval. It was about integrity under observation. Now, the season shifts. What was hidden becomes acknowledged. What was tested becomes trusted. What was sensed becomes honored. But do not assume this is the end. It is the foundation. Because once a mother stops guarding against something, she often begins preparing for it. And that preparation, quiet, subtle, intentional, is already underway. What she does next will not be loud. It will not be immediate. But it will be decisive. A door will open, not because you pushed it, but because it was finally allowed to. And when that door opens, you will realize that her extreme alertness was never a warning sign. It was confirmation that what entered her son's life carried weight strong enough to reshape destiny itself. Remain steady. Remain aligned. And stay attentive. Because what unfolds next will reveal how far this alignment is meant to go, and why this story is only just beginning.